got the donuts? World War I, or as it was known in its day, the Great War, began on July 28, 1914. The first war of the 20th century brought new technology and new terrors. War raged in the sky for the first time with air combat, while armored tanks and mustard gas stalked their victims on the ground. The men dug into trenches where disease and death were constant companions. Many called it the war to end all wars, never imagining that in just 21 years, the world would do it again. In 1917, Evangeline Booth, commander of the Salvation Army in America, sent Colonel William S. Barker to France to find out how the Salvation Army could best serve American troops overseas. Barker found the troops were understandably suffering from acute homesickness and cabled back to Booth, "Send over some lassies!" The first batch of volunteers were told, "You are going overseas to serve Christ. You must forget yourselves. Be examples of His love, willing to endure hardship, to lay down your lives if need be, for His sake." By October of that year, Ensigns Helen Peruvens and Margaret Sheldon were serving with the 1st Division. After 36 days of steady rain, cold, and depression hanging on the men, they decided they ought to be able to give them some real home cooking. Based on the shipment that came from the commissary, the lasses decided that they could make donuts. They had everything but eggs. They knew they could get the eggs from the nearby village in France. They had a little tiny pot-bellied stove that was only 18 inches, and Ensign Helen Peruvens stated that she had to be on her knees to fry up that first batch of donuts, and that they worked all through the night, and they made 150 donuts. Well, we're not in France, and I don't have a pot-bellied stove, but we are going to use the official donut recipe from the Salvation Army website. The donut recipe is very simple. It's 5 cups of flour, that's all-purpose, 2 cups of sugar, 5 teaspoons of baking powder, and a saltspoon of salt. Do you know what a saltspoon is? Neither did I. This is a saltspoon. It's 1/4 teaspoon. And that's all the dry ingredients. The wet ingredients are 1 3/4 cup of milk, whole milk please, and 2 eggs. And I'm gonna whip them up real quick. And that's it. Now the first batch that the ladies made, the lasses, they didn't have any rolling pin and they didn't have any donut cutter. So they ended up just pressing it out by hand and then cutting them and twisting them into crullers. But then they decided that they could figure it out. The men really wanted a hole in their donut. And so they ended up using a wine bottle as their rolling pin and whatever they could find to cut donuts out of. Usually it was a couple of empty cans, and one of the ladies decided that they could use the little top of the percolator off a coffee pot. And the recipe is not specific about this. I just have to flour the surface and then turn it out and knead it, but it says knead it well. Don't you love it when it's just so vague? Knead it well. Well enough for what? Well, I found with practice that if you over knead it, then it's going to be too chewy. It ends up being like a pizza dough, and that is not a light and fluffy donut. Okay, let me get a little more flour. Don't overflour it either, because that can also contribute to getting it in that stickier, chewier phase. Now it looks pretty good. I've just flattened it out a bit. I'm going to get my rolling pin and flour that. I've already spread a little bit of flour on the top here. And make sure you have enough flour on your surface. If it sticks, it's not going to come up very easy. And believe me, it's a very sad sight when it starts to tear all over the place. So I found out that these ladies, the lassies, were issued when they volunteered. As soon as they volunteered, the Army issued each one of them a .45 revolver for their own protection. And they were told that they should learn how to use it, and a helmet, and a gas mask.
Are you my mummy?
I'm going to use cookie cutters that I have. So I'm going to go grab those, and then we'll cut some donuts. Okay, I am going to cut my donuts. And I'm going to flour it because I don't want it to stick. It's going to be very sad if it doesn't come off. Oh, look, it's sticking already. Come on, baby, come off. There we go. And I figure they're going to be rustic because the ladies were out there in the trenches with the guys. So if they're a little rustic, that'll be okay. So now it's time to heat up our cooking solution. Well, I didn't say oil because we're using a tub of lard. That's right, the recipe calls for a tub of lard. So you gotta grab your tub of lard and we're gonna put it in the pot and get it going. Okay, so I needed to put a rack on a baking sheet with a little bit of newspaper underneath. That way it'll catch the grease. And I can start putting them in the fryer now. So I'm using chopsticks to flip the donuts. Now, I'm pretty sure they didn't have chopsticks in France in 1914, but use what you got, right? All right, I'm just gonna take it out. This is why I like the chopsticks. Gonna hook it, let it drain a little, and bring it out.
To say the donuts were popular would be a serious understatement. The men were drawn in by the smells of frying donuts. The first day they only made about 150, but they would be making more from then on. In a short amount of time they became known as Doughnut Girls or Donut Lassies, and the men lined up by the hundreds. Their fame spread rapidly, and back home they were celebrated on posters, newspaper articles, and even in songs.
Don't forget the Salvation Army. Always remember my donut girl. She brought them donuts and coffee. Just like an angel, she was their best pal. As brave as a lion, but meek as a lamb.
See, our finished donuts look beautiful. And you can tell that they would be a wonderful reminder of home to these guys that were so far away. And it would help boost their morale. That's how the Salvation Army lasses got their nickname, the Doughnut Girls.
Always remember my donut girl. She brought them donuts and coffee. Just like an angel, she was their best pal. As brave as a lion, but meek as a lamb. She carried on beside the thunderbolt.